North Korea and the United States have been alienated for decades. Now, both leaders in the same city, in their hotels, just down the street from each other, gearing up to talk face to face. Our Sasha Petrusek is in Singapore. And Sasha, it might seem like the Kim and Trump show, but there are other agendas at work here. Obviously, South Korea worries about nuclear weapons on its doorstep. But then there's China. What's its play?
It has a lot at stake here, Adrian. It is watching this very closely and very nervously. It's not at the table, of course, in Singapore, but the problem is it doesn't really trust either of the two players who are.
In China's east, North Korea is just a sliver of water away, close enough that underground nuclear tests on the other side have triggered earthquakes here. Not to mention fear of radiation on the Chinese promenade. It's not good for us, he says. Could be dangerous. Chinese leaders agree. Indeed, President Xi Jinping had his own 2 summits with Kim Jong-un even before this flurry of diplomacy with the West. Fearing North Korea's unpredictable weapons program, yes, but fearing the risks of Donald Trump's influence even more.
So there's a lot of diplomatic surprises happening here.
Paul Hanley was the White House representative at past negotiations with North Korea. He says Beijing worries Trump and Kim will hit it off.
The Chinese see geopolitics in a very zero-sum game. So any dramatic improvements in relations between the United States and North Korea, China worries will mean less strategic position for China in the northeast part of Asia.
The Chinese summits were meant to remind Kim who his traditional friend is and his closest trading partner, despite China's enforcement of UN sanctions. But while Beijing doesn't want a quick American-made solution to the North's missile threat, a Trump victory, it also doesn't want negotiations to fail spectacularly, especially if Kim responds with more missiles.
What we worried about at this moment is that two sides will insist upon their bottom line and not giving any inch to each other.
That could lead to a military confrontation on China's doorstep. Chaos, says Zhao. He says Beijing doesn't have nearly as much control in Pyongyang as the U.S. believes.
So I think it's a mistake to think that China can just give orders to North Korea and direct them to go one way or another.
Still, there may be more influence than Beijing would like others to believe. For instance, when North Korea blew up its nuclear test site last month, only about 100 kilometers from the Chinese border.
The closure of the Punggye-ri testing site, I wouldn't be surprised if that was something that the Chinese told the North Koreans. If you want any help from Beijing, you close that and you don't do any more detonations there.
And in return, perhaps offering to loosen enforcement of the goods that get across that river, the border.
So, Sasha, we're now hearing reports from North Korean state media that its regime is open to discussing a permanent and durable peacekeeping mechanism as well as denuclearization. So can you read between the lines for us here? How serious an overture is that?
That's an open question. You have to remember that over the past 2 decades, a quarter century, in fact, North Korea has committed to exactly that many times and has not kept its word. The big question is, what is the definition of getting rid of these things, getting rid of these missiles? The United States thinks they'll be boxed up and carted off. North Korea has a very different idea. And now that it has the formula to build nuclear missiles, what's to say that they won't go back and build new ones if these are removed? At the end of the day, it's all up to verification. That means having some kind of inspectors on the ground inside North Korea's most secret labs. And the question is, will they ever really agree to that? Adrian?
Okay, and Sasha, you'll be with us live on the National tomorrow night as the summit gets underway. Sasha Petrusek, thanks.